Well, it is 7 o'clock, so can I welcome you all to the first meeting, second meeting, isn't it, of FES this year. I'm going to welcome you all to the meeting. I have apologies from Jonathan Nixon. Are there any other apologies?
Assume apologies.
Are there any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the last meeting. Would someone like to move them or comment on them? Is it the seconded? Yeah. Are there any comments on the minutes? Can I see all those in favour of the minutes then? Thank you. Public forum. There's no one here. Exclusion of the public, item 6, which is just the item 14 and 15 at the end. And whilst we are speaking on item 14, I want to mention, it was mainly regarding the finance post. I want to mention something on the other post as well, so we'll do it at item 14 in private at the end. Yeah? And someone propose and second that we do move those items into private session at the end. Thank you. Financial update, item 7. Gina?
Yeah, so you've got your usual finances budget summary, which we look at actual spending commitments. We're looking at about 70% of the budget being spent. Again, there may be things with the town hall that we might need some extra expenditure on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the actual spends, including commitment, is coming up to about 70% of the budget so far this year. There will be maybe some extra repairs and maintenance for town hall. Other than that, nothing expected that would be out of the ordinary to dramatically change that position. Does anyone have any questions?
Just a quick one on the summary there. So we've got things like, as you say, that there might be some stuff coming up on the town hall, for example. I know we've got Allocation coaches on the agenda a bit later. Things like allotments and cone in bloom. So quite low percentage spends so far, and not much in the commitments section so far either. Are they going to have stuff being done for springtime before the end of March, or are we just going to roll over stuff to next year then?
So, if I may, Chair, through. So for the allotments, we have got a couple of big projects that's coming up, including some fencing and some tree work, as well as the purchase of the land, which we're just waiting for final bits to come through for. In regards to cone in bloom, the contract for the flowers has just been agreed, so there will be more allocations coming off that very shortly. Does that help?
You can do it all together if you want.
A quick question on the balance sheet. The debtor balance, 11.5 grand. I know we got a bad debt provision of something as well, 8 and a bit. Is that still against some of the 11, or is that just an old provision? Do we have doubts about that 11?
Some of it is rental property income. The reason why we put that provision in place was obviously because we'd had the pandemic and we were unsure if businesses were going to recover, and if they were, how quickly they were going to recover. So really, I think that there is still a question of whether we may need to use that provision for that. The other stuff is mainly store bookings and things that have been recent. So it's, yeah.
Okay. Along further down the sheet, just a question for my own information. I know that, for example, code 3 of the currency of fund is obviously the income received less expenditure there, as well as something that needs to come there. But 181 general reserve, that's not an earmark reserve or a minimum revenue reserve, that's just extra reserves that we just have as a general thing. Do we have is there actually a guideline? I don't know the answer. Is there actually a guideline for how much reserves you should have in place?
Well, that's why we put in the minimum revenue reserve, because that's an indication of how much we need to have on hand, which is classed as, they recommend 3 to 6 months worth of expenditure. This was 4 months of our expenditure, although if we want to stick with that 4 month, we really need to look at increasing that minimum reserve to about 275.
Is the 181 general reserve? That's just spare general reserve.
That is spare general reserve. I mean, there may come a time when we can actually take that minimum revenue reserve and just add it to the general reserve and just say we have general reserves of this much. It was more to a reminder for us that we obviously need to keep that amount at hand. So
that then feeds into the final thing, the one over the page there, about the allocation of the additional precept. So I had a look at some of these and thought to myself, well, looking at the amount we're spending in certain areas, things like the Primate Community Centre, for example, what else do we have here? Things like community development, things like CCTV. We're allocating extra funds to those, or those balances on their own are quite high. And I thought one thing we haven't got is potentially an earmark reserve for future asset transfers. So, we've mulled about the idea, and we mentioned in various of the risk registers, etc., that we may well be taking on extra assets and services in the future. So things like car park, cemetery, the Mooney, etc., etc. So I thought it might be prudent to start building up an earmark reserve for things like that. And I'm guessing, so I propose that to everybody as a thought there. The other one is that I guess each year, as part of our Treasury and Reserves management policy, we do explain roughly what each of these are for. When does that happen during the year?
that will be done once we have a year-end position, and we've done the year-end accounts. Then I'll do a new investment strategy for the year to come.
Yes, all I'm suggesting is basically the allocation of the precept is one thing, but I'm suggesting that we perhaps use some of that to set up an earmarked reserve for future asset transfers.
Well, I think if year-end balances allow, we could set up an earmark reserve for that. We also need to set up an earmark reserve for elections, I think would be a prudent thing to do as well.
Howard?
Until we have some idea of what we're likely to be landed with from Pendle or, excuse me, we could set up an earmark reserve for every last little but all we are doing then is reducing the flexibility we've got to use the money in an unforeseen circuit. I mean, I don't know, a meteorite hits the town hall, or perhaps a poor example, but there are lots of things that could happen. None of us, none of us, apart from one person in this room, knows of the plans for the market and round there, because no one as yet, from Pendle or Pearl or anybody, seemed fit to talk to us about it. You know, we may be thinking of, well, perhaps we should be putting money aside to improve a bit of that that we would like to see, rather than what Pendle would like to see, or people who've got these flights of fancy for the bus station and everything. I see that David Coburn Price is so interested in it, he's not listening. But you know the plans. We don't know the plans. I know certain people have had a brainstorming session, which, you know, is all well and good, but the more time that passes before there is some indication of what is planned, and some firming up of it, all it will do is generate rumours and all sorts of things. Rumours are already, or comments are already starting of, the bus station doesn't need anything doing to it, it's all right. Someone has already commented that the market's fine as it is, why do we want to do that? And all the rest of it. So I think, you know, a plea to the powers that be at Pendle, talk to us and tell us what the plans are, give us some indication. It may be, as I say, if we have a good outturn at the end of the financial year, we can stump up something towards it. But until we know what is being talked about, you know, we just don't know. And as for taking on the Muni, cemeteries and all the rest of it, that is much longer term. There are so many I's to be dotted, T's to be crossed before we can even think of taking on things like car parks and cemeteries, without suddenly increasing the workload and the numbers of staff we need. I mean, presumably people would be stupid across from Pendle if that was the case, but it's probably not as simple as that, because some of those staff will be Liberator staff and some will be Pendle, and so there are lots of hoops and things to go through before we're at the stage of reserving money to do it and settling down to it. And I think there is a danger that the wider population of Cone and the town council are being taken for granted, that something will come up and everybody will tip the cap and say, oh, isn't this wonderful? We've got the wonderful government that have nicked all the money in the past few years, have now given it back to the area in the tune of £6 million. And there's going to be a huge regeneration of some sort in the town centre. So, you know, let's not keep all this hush-hush and all secret and lots of little plans away. And even some of the board members of Pearl haven't been informed of what's going on. So it's a plea for some openness and some consultation.
Want me to answer that one, Chairman? In terms of the market, given you talked a lot about the market, even though I never mentioned the market, the market plans are being developed by Pendle Borough Council, and the Pendle officers are controlling the process in terms of consultations and visibility, etc., and that's well underway. The people invited to the inverted commas secret meeting, which took place here in this very room, were all Cone area councillors. So one Liberal Democrat was invited, but she didn't bother turning up. So we did, because we're interested in it, and we heard some initial views about what was being thought about and developed, etc. But because it's all being brainstormed, then nothing is ready to be put out to the public. A formal consultation process is being developed, as various announcements have already made. In terms of setting aside a reserve for asset transfers, that's why I kept it as a single broad umbrella term for asset transfers, not pinpointing any particular one, but we know it's on the horizon. We know we've already done some asset transfers before. It's logical that this sort of thing is what an earmark reserve is for. Meteorites, as you say, very remote. But then again, I'm sure some of the things in here are quite remote as well in terms of the likelihood of spending money in the next 1 to 2 to 3 years. That's why they're built up to the level they are. So merely just expressing it from a prudence point of view that if you want to start exploring some of these things, you don't have to wait until the exact number of pounds and pennies are identified, because you're not going to get that number, because Pendle Borough Council's accounting records simply don't have that information. They have broad things with categorisations of costs as well, you may know from the time as a borough councillor in the past. So I think it's prudent to set up an earmark reserve. That's my suggestion. It's a very open suggestion. And I think it makes prudent sense to start to think about that when we assess the year-end position. So that was all.
Well, I can answer that partially, because I seem to remember that over 6 months ago now, we highlighted the point to Pendle Borough Council that 11 years had passed since the allotments were transferred to us, and we still hadn't had the freeholds, etc., transferred over to us or anything. And we did say at that time that we would not have any talks with them or transfer anything until they had transferred all the allotments. Now that's 6 months ago, and to my knowledge they have transferred 1 site, possibly 2, and I don't think they're finalised yet. So that's 6 months gone. Altogether, there are, what, 15, 20 sites? So that's going to be at least 10 years before, if they've only transferred 1 site in 6 months, by the time they've transferred 20, it's going to be 10 years. So I don't think we will be talking to Pendle Council, if we stick to what we said, for 10 years, because they're absolutely useless at transferring the sites.
Yeah.
And if we don't stick to that, we will never get the freeholds.
I think I would agree.
And another point is we can't have any discussions and put anything aside to try and transfer anything that Pendle are thinking of transferring to us, because they haven't made one suggestion or any costings for anything that they might want to transfer to us yet. They've done nothing.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely useless.
Both the finance and legal teams have had significant shifts in their personnel. The legal department, I think, is down to a hair shirt, and they're obviously not prioritising allotment transfers. And as you say, if they're that old, then it's a poor performance. I agree. I've mentioned it to them a couple of times now. I would suggest more a sort of parallel running thing, so that, you know, if you start to express an interest in something, you're more likely to get the focus of the small legal department to be able to focus on that, because there's some interest there. I can kick them to some extent, obviously. Well, I'll try my best.
Chair, the answer to the solution is to kick the MP, to kick the Treasury and the powers that be down in Westminster to give back to Pendle the money that they took away from it. That is why the legal department is down, to quote a hair shirt, it's because the money has been taken away from Pendle, not just Pendle, but other boroughs in the country, but more noticeably in the north of the country. So that's why there's this great talk of levelling up and everything, because it's got to be levelled up, because it's been levelled down in the past by Messrs Osborne, I can't remember the rest, Sajid Javid for a couple of months, and who is it now? Who's the wonderful, Rishi, yeah, he's all right. Talk to your party. That's where the problem lies.
I think slightly pointlessly off target for a Cone Town Council meeting, but so nothing else to add, Chairman.
But we do need to get these
we do.
freeholds transferred.
I agree.
And I think the only way we're going to get them to do it, and as I said, it's going to take 10 years at the rate they're going at, and someone needs to say something to them. Now, you've got better contacts with them now than I have, so possibly you can pass the message on again and see what they're going to do.
How many are we up to
Because
now,
why should we discuss even thinking about taking on the cemetery when we've gone 11 years waiting for them to send us the freeholds through so that we could sign everything over with the land registry, etc., for the ownership of the allotments, and they haven't done that in 11 years, so why consider anything else?
As it was requested by the council as well, that nothing was taken forward until this transfer happened, we did actually at the same time ask the Borough Council to provide us with some figures of what assets would cost or are currently. Even broad strokes would have been something, so that when the time is right, the officers can do the work in the background for yourselves. We still haven't received that anything at all either. So we are trying, but Pendle don't seem.
I believe it's on a very long list of things to do for them, because I have asked this question, obviously, in order to prepare it. And there are several discussions with several different councils which have stalled because of the need to get the information. But, you know, they have a small and newish finance department, and they're trying to get the information ready for their year end and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's on the list, but it's slow moving, like everything seems to be. But given this council can be fast and dynamic, then I'm suggesting, don't look surprised, Chairman, we can be fast and dynamic to be able to say, let's, you know, look at our year end position, see what plans we've got for the next few years or so, and set up the appropriate reserves to identify that and make a commitment to the public, this is how we're going to spend your money.
Commitment to spend money on.
No, I just feel with these transfers, particularly with the allotments, we're going backward. We're just not going anywhere.
I'll mention it to them again, but obviously, as you know, it's year end for them just as it is for us, so I'll see what I can do to chase a different department.
I mean, it was different when Dean was here. You could say something to Dean and he would listen to you, and something would happen. Might not be what you wanted to happen, but something would happen. Now, it's just a dead loss, nothing happens. It's going downhill fast. And I'm not blaming that on a political party, but it is going downhill fast. Yes. Yeah, so can someone move and second that we accept the 4 financial updates? Seconded. Those in favour? Thank you. Cone Town Council Pandemic Risk Register.
Got a few comments on questions on this one. First question is actually, how long do we want to keep a separate pandemic risk register, given the overlap of a number of the items in here with our standard overall risk register?
Well, I was just going to say it's debatable how long we're actually going to need this register. but I do think it was obviously substantial, even though we thought it was only going to last a couple of months, it's ended up being 2 years worth. So I think it is something that we still need to consider, and it does present different risks to the council if it does continue or if it happens again.
Chair, it would be there's every indication that whether so is doing the rounds, although it is no more potent apparently than the original one, which is a bit more transmissible itself off. So there is every chance that we're going to be hit with more problems towards winter time, but we don't know. Figures are rising again. At the minute, I know that extra figures have just been dumped in from some time ago, but generally the figures are still rising. They're still knocking 100,000 cases a day. Some tests are dropping because people think, they think it's all over, but it isn't yet. So people don't get tested, so they don't find it. So it can be a bit of a vicious circle. So we need to keep it going for this next 12 months. Hopefully by, this time next year, we're all COVID free.
I have tried to keep it quite generic, as in to say a pandemic risk register rather than obviously a COVID-19, because we could get a completely different virus that comes along. But then obviously in the how is this risk managed at present section, I've related it to COVID and the current pandemic. So
a few detailed ones then. Number 7. I think we touched on this with the last register. Obviously, we are protected to a large degree, given the vast majority of our income comes from the Precept. And in the tolerance level of risk section, and things like, whilst we talk about events obviously being significant discretionary expenditure, etc., then I think things like the blues, of course, we've got rid of most of the risk for this year, haven't we? Right, okay. Well, in that case, for 2023, hopefully, then the blues will be off our hands and in the hands of a private body, perhaps. On the 4th line down there, by the way, you've got corresponding expenditure. A couple of little typos there. I think potentially the likelihood scorings might be a little bit high. To say, for example, the risk managed at present, I think the risk is quite well managed at present at the moment. We talked about the amount of reserves we've got, for example. So I think likelihood of 5 dropping to a likelihood of 4 is probably a little bit on the high side. And when it comes to the EMRs over in the right-hand column, controls to be implemented, yes, as we touched on earlier, we've got a whole portfolio of EMRs there, and we will have plans around each one of them. Number 8, empty property. I guess this means almost like property that's never occupied, and therefore subject to vandalism and damage, etc. Not things like shops, Primit Community Centre, Town Hall, etc., which are occupied periodically. So in a way, I think the likelihood from the word go is quite low, because we don't actually have any vacant properties, do we?
Yeah.
This is in relation to a pandemic. So when we have a pandemic, the properties become emptier for longer periods of time. So, for example, the community centre shut for 12 months. And although we had some maintenance done on it the majority of the time, and it was similar with some of the rental properties and that sort of thing. So they become more empty. Yes, that's what's on that one.
All right. I think, one little computing tip for you, by the way. In number 10, in your first purple box, you know where you've got a list of things and you want them line by line? So where you've got the word larger doesn't make it down to the bottom line. If after you've typed the word assessments, if you do Alt and then return, that actually puts a proper return in. So you don't have to space it out, so it goes to the next line in a wraparound. Next one for you, number 14. So this is the biggest risk we've got in terms of scores. I think you could say that we have managed the risk really quite well, as you say, with looking at reduced capacities, looking at number of people coming in, etc., and how they move around. So I think, does that merit a 4 and a 3? Impact, I think we've managed the impact to a large degree. We've outsourced the deal for the main venues. We've outsourced the deal for the Roadhouse. As you say, we've got some money invested in it, but potentially we could think about reducing the score in a few months' time on that one. I think let me see. Oh yeah, and the final one, 17. I think again we touched on this one with the fact that we do have a 3-year budget in place. So again, just noting we've looked at that. That gives us a better idea about how we use funds and where they go, etc., etc. Over on the right-hand side in controls to be implemented, you might want to have a look again at that as the council grows, the maintain the O value. Just try and have a reword of that one. It doesn't quite make sense. I get the general gist that we're looking at making sure we've got appropriate levels of reserves to cover unexpected expenditure. But no, that was all.
I think we've got to remember that this was brought in. I won't say in a rush because that's the wrong phrase to do it by. But it was brought in because of the pandemic, and we didn't know where things were going to go, and we didn't know how long it was going to last, and it probably has lasted longer than we thought. And it does have to be reviewed every year. So could I suggest that we agree to send it back to full council for them to approve it again for another 12 months with a view that hopefully in 12 months it will no longer be needed.
Yep.
And if it is needed, that we do at that point then in 12 months try to make it more into an abridged version of it and make it part and parcel of our full-blown risk management register and make it part of it. Hopefully by the end of the 3rd year, when we've got to 3 years, the pandemic will be hopefully long gone, and we might be able to not have it. But for the next year, with the figures being as high as they are and fluctuating like they do, I think we are far safer and more prudent with it in place rather than not have it in place. So could I suggest that we move to send it to full council for them to approve it for another 12 months with a view then to making a decision. Yep. And if we still need it then, let's have it part and parcel of the main risk register.
Yeah, and then at that point, as you say, we could just take the main register and add a couple of points on the end to create risk of pandemic.
Yeah, a sort of an abridged version of it added into the main register, if it's needed.
Yes. Agreed.
So if I move that, will someone second it? Those in favour? Thank you. Item 9, Alkin Courts Walled Garden.
Okay, so this has come from, we had a structural survey done on the wall, which suggested that it needed quite a lot of repair work. From the report that we've got from the allotments officer, to completely repair it, we're looking at over £300,000 at an estimation. We then did get a quote to partly repair, and then obviously looked at fencing more immediately to make it safer. The recommendation is that we do put additional fencing there, more permanent fencing, to ensure the safety of the public using the walled garden. And this is to authorise the expenditure for that fencing work.
Chair,
Yeah.
one or two queries. There are sort of odd dates all over the place here, and I was getting terribly confused. Trying to make sense of it all. In paragraph 9, I think that's just oh, I forgot, we're in a new year, and it should be the January 22. But on the report, it says that Lingard's did the survey on the 29th of June 21, but their report said they carried something out on the 15th of February 2021, and their letter's dated the 17th of February 2020, which is pretty clever. So is it that they came and had a quick look round in February and then went back in June and did the detail work? Because I'm just confused with it.
Yeah.
I think there has been some confusion on dates there. Lingard's did come out in February. We did have someone else come and give a second opinion as well. So I think that's where it's got a little confused on it. The dates on the report, on the document from the structural report, are the correct ones. So I do.
So that's the Lingard.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's just oh, we're in February of 21 and hadn't realised.
I think. Sorry.
I think the gist of it is. The gist of it is, as I see it, we either spend an awful lot of money now without a real overall plan for what we could do with that area, or we spent, and I've forgotten the figure, was it 15,000 or which would provide better fencing and better metal fencing, certainly, because there is no doubt if you go up there it looks a mess. So something needs to be done. First of all, to make it neat, not neat, make it safe first of all, and keep everybody that goes in there safe, and then in the longer term start drawing up some sorts of plan and scheme for who knows, but it needs. There have bine several attempts at putting roses in, taking roses out, but it's just generally a mess. So I think the starting point is to get it safe and looking uniform, and I think the idea in the sketch plan of moving the benches around a bit, so that, because at the moment there are two benches that you can't get at because they're behind the sort of cheap and nasty fencing, and I suspect that they also have plaques on that people paid for to have them there as a memorial. Well, no, I'm not. But either way, you know, if you paid for and you go up, you're going to be a bit disappointed. So I think as an interim to get it safe and moving and looking a bit tidier, this is the way to go. And then that gives us perhaps, you know, looking forward, some of the excess reserves that we're going to have, we can spend in Alkincoats Park to do some of the bits that perhaps never got. I'm not saying they didn't get the task, and I think we were sold a bit of a pup at the beginning. Perhaps that's too strong a word, but it wasn't handed over in as nice a condition as perhaps we were led to believe it was going to be. But it is very well used. It's very well loved, and the better we can make it. I won't say bring it up to a standard because it's a fairly high standard now, but the more we can do to put the icing on the cake, I think we should do. So I'd certainly be in favour of pointing a bit of any surplus money we've got towards Alkincoats. But as a first start, let's get this safety remedial working.
So I've got some big problems with their report, actually. I think they sort of acknowledge the fact that we think heritage is important. So they've said, Combe Town Council say heritage is important. The setting of the gardens themselves are important. And, you know, this is a fine, you know, Georgian Victorian asset that's developed through life. Anyone who reads the non-designated heritage asset list will find we put chapter and verse in about this thing. I think the concern is that Lingard's are clearly building surveyors, not heritage surveyors. They don't mention anything about what the problem actually is and how it's come about, rather just take it all down, build it all back up again, and it'll cost a fortune. So, well, no, I know what the problem is. The problem is cement, and also the coping stones. I mean, if you look at that picture there, that picture is an absolute shocker, isn't it? You can see there that whatever they've done, the poor maintenance by the previous, you know, borough council looking after it or whatever, that's led to cement doesn't flex with moisture and cold, etc. It's got to be lime mortar, and that's what they've not done. Fundamentally, that's the thing. Taking off the coping stones, I believe, apparently, they poured bitumen and things like that on the top. So that, of course, meant that that wasn't perfect. So water gets in, it all freezes and cracks and expands, etc., and cement does not move. Now, Lingard never mentioned the word cement, and they don't mention the word lime either. So that just shows they're not the right people to give us any advice on what to do and how much it's going to cost. Because those numbers are enormous. I suggest that what we should do is approach people that know about conservation walls, conservation buildings, etc. There's someone they use at the Pendle Heritage Centre called the Conservation Services. They know all about it. So they could help understand the problem and get better, more informed quotes. I don't know how many quotes we got, by the way, in the end. Was it one or two? Three. Okay. Right. I hope they didn't look at the Lingard report then. So I think the other thing we've got as a fundamental point, I agree with Howard. I think that what you need to do is we do option 3, which is to safeguard it for the time being to make sure it doesn't fall over on people whilst we finish the investigations. The only problem with option 3 is the actual choice of fencing, which is not appropriate for that setting. To have vertical things with wires is not the way to do it. You need proper estate fencing, 4 metal horizontal bars with some verticals periodically. That's what you do for estate fencing. This is what you would have had in a garden of this age in this location. So yeah, go round the woodland, as that drawing says, take it round the top of the woodland, and also protect the seating area just in front of the wall. I think one suggestion Lingard did get right was that probably putting buttresses in is the right idea. You don't have to take the whole entire wall down, put some buttresses in to secure it. There's no point, you shouldn't lower the wall. The idea of taking it down and building a shorter wall, that takes away from what the walled garden was in the past. You're basically just doing an ordinary, sort of almost like a suburban garden with a wall that's 4 or 5 feet high. So that's not right either. The other thing that we should investigate as a town council is there are plenty of grants and funds available for this sort of heritage garden project. And I know people like David Clamp, for example. I'm sure he'd probably love to do things like put the glass houses back and put the sort of potting sheds and things like that. As a side benefit, by the way, if we did have those sorts of things, then we could help Cone in Bloom by preserving the begonias over winter. So I think having the setup like that, researching what we can do to get funds, so we don't have to pay for it all ourselves. There are funds to do this, and therefore we could apply for some of those to get it back to its former glory and have it lovely and safe for the people to go to and to enjoy. Did I have any other points? Oh yes, old walls are never straight, by the way. So pictures of things that have a little sort of wobble and kink in them or whatever, these things are, 1.5, 2 feet wide. So they're bound to not be straight. So I think let's not be, too perfect about things, because they never were in the past. They tried their best. So yeah, aside from, yes, option 3, which I agree with, but please use estate fencing. I can give you some ideas about what it looks like. And then the idea, as I say, of researching grants in the meantime to try to mitigate some of the cost for us. I think that's quite important. So I second the proposal to go for option 3, but with a revised structure of the estate fencing.
I don't have a problem with having better fencing. Initially, my first reaction to the whole thing was, and I got shot down for saying it 12 months ago, but I still think to some degree I'm right. The wall that's there now is, you could say it's a heritage wall. It is, probably is anyway. But the whole idea of knocking it down and rebuilding it, I can't get my head round, because it is no longer a wall with any heritage. Because to me, if you knock it down, you are knocking the wall down, so the heritage wall's gone, and you're building a new wall with the original stone. So it really doesn't have as much heritage as it does now, even though it's in a poor state.
Depends how well you do it, I think.
Well, yeah, exactly. But coming back to the fencing, I'm not opposed to us getting some better looking fencing. Might be more expensive. I don't know. It might be. We may need to get some prices for it. But what I would like to do is to get the work started as soon as possible. For the reason I want to try and get as much of the work done as we possibly can in-house with our 2 own staff. So to that end, I would prefer, and it's only my thoughts, it's up to committee to decide what they want to do. To my thoughts, we ought to use our own staff and do as much of it in-house as we can and keep control over it. But we need to get a lot of it done before the watering season starts for the Cone in Bloom, because then we lose 1 or more of the lensmen on a daily basis for the watering in summer, particularly if it's a long dry period in summer. So I think there is some urgency there to get some of it done this spring rather than this summer. But I don't have a problem in going for some better fencing, and I don't think actually Howard would have. The better we can make it look, all well and good.
Yeah.
So where are we at with the fencing as regarding costings and what have you? Can we get...
Delegated within the 20, or if you want to put up, say, 25 to cover any additional that they might be.
I'm happy to go along with that.
And we'll make sure we get the quotes.
I think that makes sense. I can send you 1 or 2 links.
But to me, it does make sense using our own 2 people.
Absolutely.
rather than, you know, pay another company an arm and a leg to get it done.
Yeah, if David, if you can send me some links to the type of fencing that you, and then I would say though there is a chance that budget-wise, given the lead time on this kind of fencing, that we may only have to pay a deposit this financial year, and the rest will be paid next financial year.
And let's not forget the real damage was done there 50, whenever it was, when in their great wisdom, I can say burghers, can't I? That sat in this chamber decided to knock the Alkincoats Hall down, and then since then, the farm buildings, the greenhouses and everything have just generally been gone to rack and ruin, and we are where we are. I think the repairs that were referred to about putting bitumen on and sticking cement in it were probably done 50s and 60s, because, well, you only have to look at the joyful way they did with the what is now Hartley Square in the late 60s, early 70s. It should, but, well, they were a bunch of heathens, some of them.
Just in case any additional with the new stand fence. So change that in option 3. I'm looking at Gina because she's in.
Leave it at 15 with a contingency of 10. So you've still got your 25. Yeah? And just going back to something that David mentioned, which was the glass structure. I don't know when that was knocked down, because I have never ever seen it. Because apart from the sort of 1950s-ish greenhouse that was there, where the rose garden is in the middle of what everyone calls the secret garden, there was a big glass conservatory type structure there, which is on all the old maps, and I don't know when that went. I assume that went sometime in 20s or 30s, I don't know. Because I don't know, I can't find anyone that I've spoken to, that's several people quite a bit older than me, and no one can remember seeing it. So when that actually went, I don't know.
I think the only greenhouses were municipal ones that were a bit further.
The metal ones? Yeah. Well, there were one down where benches are. So we're okay with that. Did we vote on it? We have now. Item 10, the request from Combe Bid.
I think it's a good idea, this one. Give them a notional charge, show some skin in the game. And I think they've got obligations to do certain things, and we'll do the rest, and I think that sounds fine. So I move the recommendations.
Are we leaving it to officers to decide the nominal charge?
It says 30.
We're happy with that then? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Those in favour? Thank you. Item 11, Town Hall maintenance. Yeah.
So I'm going to start with the good news. The end office that we were having to sort out the latest damp patching is now dry. The coving's been replaced, the picture rail's done, and the plastering's been finished. So there should be the first fix of the lighting fittings this week, and then hopefully it should be decorated by, we are having a slight issue getting decorators in because they're busy, so 4 to 6 weeks, but that would then complete that one. On a not so good news note, unfortunately, we've had an issue with the flagpole again, and the ropes snapped on it in essence. So we sorted out tried to get it repaired last week, and unfortunately, due to the lovely weather conditions, that's not been feasible. My suggestion to council for this one is that we, to be completely honest, don't try it again till the spring months, because the weather is just, it's not on your side for it, and you don't want to waste several £1,000s on it. So I would suggest that maybe we do a press release just saying we do apologise for this, because it does mean that the 6th of February, when we should have a Union Jack flown for the Jubilee, you'll only have one across the road. 6th of Feb, you're supposed to have some date in February as well. They want one as well. So it's just a thought from the council, just to say, because we are already getting the odd, there's no flag on the town hall again, but I'm guessing council don't want to throw money into the wind, so to speak. Yeah, so. No, well, we did give it a go, but unfortunately it just wasn't possible. So if committee are happy with that, we'll draft a press release.
Have we got more than one Union flag? I just wondered if for the day we could put more than one up.
Not in that size.
The ones out there are not the same size.
They last longer too.
I think if we look carefully, there's probably still a St George's flag somewhere over Tom Hills, you know. In fact, it's probably 2 or 3 over there.
Oh no, this one is in my office.
Oh, right.
We managed to get it without it ending up on the M65. So if committee are happy with that, we'll draft a press release and run it past the chair.
It's not a case of not having tried, and I'm not sure how much the members of this committee are aware of
How much I tried.
of what happened. We had the job booked to be done.
We did.
With the road closure that were to be put in place.
We put it in place.
And probably one of the biggest cherry pickers in the area to reach to get up to that height. And obviously you can't just ring up and order it on demand and 10 minutes it'll be here. It has to be all planned into the future. There is a cost to it, obviously. They turned up on the day. It were a little bit windy down at ground level, we could say, couldn't we?
It was all right.
And then as you start going up and up and up and start getting higher with the cherry picker, it's, you know, it's swaying more and more and more, and eventually you have to give up the job and come back down to ground level. So there were a cost to it, and they just couldn't get up there.
Yeah.
Now, with the winds the way it is at this time of year, particularly Feb and March tend to be windy as well, my concern is that we've lost money with doing this now and having to book it, and if we book it in windy season, it's highly likely the same may happen again. So I think really we need to be waiting while weather settles down, look for some better weather coming in, and then get it booked and get it done. But one of the problems with it is, years ago, the only time there were a flag flown on Cone Town Hall was certain days and special occasions. And rope used to last forever, because it weren't doing anything, it was just there. In the last 20 years, it's reverted to being flown every day, 24/7, and obviously there's a lot more wear on mechanism and on rope for flagpole as well, so they don't last as long.
We have investigated an option of a different sort of, it's not a rope, but it is a galvanised steel one that should last better. And we're also going to, we've also, last time we were up there, made a edit, should we say, to the pulley at the top. So you would be able to now fit, if you saw wear, attach new to old and get it through the top. So we have made provision that hopefully this would be the last time he had to do it. We did get up to 3/4 of the way up there, and it was very wet and windy at 3 a.m. So,
In the long run, I think it would be far cheaper to change the rope more often. And if you can fasten the new one to the old one and pull it round till you've got all the new one back inside, and then you take the old one off, you're home and dry, aren't you? But it needs doing before it breaks. It's no good trying to do it after it's broken. So that's where we are with that. Right?
Is the report over now? Your report. Is there an update on the clock at all?
I've forgotten that one. So the clock is currently in lots and lots of pieces. All the cogs and things have been taken away to be cleaned. It has been, the lovely paint from a different contractor has been removed, so it's been restored to its original colour. The aim is within another, I'm going to say, week and a half, it should be back up and running with all the bells and whistles. Should be a week and a half, at the longest 2. Just, it's getting the parts away, cleaned, and most of it's been done by our lovely contractor, but a couple of them have had to be sent somewhere else. But they are on with it. They've been in nearly every day in the last week. Okay. Stop people asking. No problem. I think that's all that we've been doing.
Okay. So we're all okay with that item then? It's only to note, isn't it, anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah. Item 12, items for a future month's agenda.
Can I just put one on about the future of the Precept Community Centre and how we, plan to use it, charge for it, market it, etc. Obviously, it's coming out of the pandemic now, so let's try and see what we can do to get it and make some money for us. That's good. That's what I'd like to know. I'd like to know what revenue is being generated, etc. How the funds flow work, etc. Are we investing in it? Do we need to invest, etc., etc. That sort of report. Just to, it's one of our assets, so I'll pick on that one.
So can we have a report and include in it how much use it is getting, so we can?
Yeah, so we get an idea of how much money it makes a
Yeah.
month, that sort of thing, and what it costs us, etc.
Yeah. Is there anything else to go on agenda for next time? No. Item 13, date and time of next regular meeting, which is Tuesday, 1st of March, in 4 weeks' time. So can we now disconnect the streaming